Welcome back. Hope you had a good Shavuos or Shavuot, a good weekend, Memorial Day weekend. I think we've spoken since then, but still, for those of you who haven't been here since then, welcome back. Today, we got a great winery with a lot of history, and they're doing some really cool, fantastic stuff. We have Leah and Zach both representing the winery here today. We also got Josh, who, as always, is going to lead the way here today. He's going to take it away, MC this event. Thank you, Josh, for being here. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from New York. As always, we have some fun people with us today. We're going to be talking about a fun winery, Segal Winery, today. We're going to talk about 4 different wines. We have 2 people from the winery joining us. We have Zach joining us to talk about some of the wines today. So we're going to throw it over to Zach to talk about some of the wines from Segal Winery. He's one of the winemakers over there, making some of the great wines that are coming our way. And he's going to be able to tell us some cool news stories about some new stuff that's happening over there.
My name's Zach. I'm from Israel. I work as one of the winemakers for Segal. And together with a group of winemakers, we are responsible for everything that I'm about to talk about. I'm about to present 4 new wines that are about to get to the US. 2 of them are already there, as you probably know, or if you don't, 2 of them are already there. And well, basically 4 of them are already there, and gonna have a surprise for later. So I'm gonna start with a short presentation regarding what's new with Segal. It's we're branding it as no longer Segal's, but as Segal. It is a wild winemaking technique that we're trying to incorporate regarding Segal. As you can see, new branding, new logo. We're trying to move in and give Segal a new look. These are the wines that are currently available at the US. The Segal Fusion, which you probably already know, the Segal Special Reserve, which is Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Merlot. The new series, the wild fermentation series of Chardonnay and a Cabernet Sauvignon, which I'm about to talk about in a short while. And the single vineyard Dijon from the Upper Galilee, and the Petit Unfiltered and the Unfiltered flagship wine of Segal, has been for a long time. Again, the Petit UF, or the Petit Unfiltered, is another wine that is trying to show minimal intervention and kind of a wild winemaking techniques. So again, the 4 wines that I'm about to go through today, and mainly focus on the 2 that are the newest, are the wild fermentation. And I'll just like to talk about Segal for a bit for now. So again, there's a new story. There's an Israeli winery, local and genuine. We want to bring out the terroir and the materials that we use to make the wines, rather than talk about other things. We try to bring in local terroir, grapes, and vineyards. The new Segal branding is, first of all, about the grapes. And we try to bring it forward with minimal intervention in the wine production. We use different techniques. Obviously, we do intervene in many of the parts, but we're trying to make certain techniques that would bring the grapes forward into the bottle.
Zach, quick question for you. What's the biggest thing that you don't do to make it different? What would that be?
That would be, in some cases, in the wild fermentation technique, we don't add yeast, which was more of a way that old wines were used to be made, as they would used to put wines and crush grapes, put them outside, and wait for something to happen. we already know that yeast are responsible for that, but now we don't add commercial yeast. We use whatever's in the vineyard, whatever's in the winery, and the results are absolutely magnificent. So again, traditional methods that emphasize the real taste of the grapes, we try to bring it forward, and aromatic spectrum is what we're all about. Our main goal and agenda is to maintain maximum authenticity of the grapes as close to nature as it gets. One of the things that we're trying to incorporate with the wild fermentation is bring in the yeast from the vineyard, which will bring in more of the terroir aspect of the grapes and of the area that has been grown, and we're really proud of the results. In other words, we're trying to make a wild wine, as I've said before. Has no limits, and it chooses what to acquire from nature. We let it bring its own perspective of how it was grown, what flavors it wants to absorb from the barrel or either from its surroundings. It's rough and independent, unmanageable, kind of a rebel, uncontrollable, and we're trying to bring it in with a new logo that will bring forward our new winery almost, as we're trying to bring it out. This is one of the places that the wines are being made in our lab, trying to use old school equipment such as aspiration for measuring SO2 content to more relevant and more new techniques such as a new FOS machines, which is completely automated, and we're trying to bring in the first wine that we want to talk about is the wild fermentation. If you want to grab a glass, I'm already drinking the red.
So we're gonna be starting with the Chardonnay. The
Going to start on the Chardonnay. I'm going to go over the wines as a whole, and then we can try and maybe talk about maybe certain aspects of the wine. In general, we are trying to remove the impact of commercial yeast. That's the bottom line. The whole idea is to let the yeast that are found in the vineyard, that are brought to the winery with the grapes themselves, try to make them do the work and ferment the wine. We start with a pulp. We'll start with a mash, crushed grapes, and then we usually add yeast, but on this type of process, we just eliminate it. We actually, on the Chardonnay, 2019 Chardonnay, we actually took a bucket full of grapes, we put it outside for a day, it started fermenting, and then we added it back to the tank, and the yeast started multiplying in the tank and just fermented the wine as is. What we added to the bucket was whole clusters and some crushed grapes that came right from the vineyard. So we want to believe that the yeast that fermented this specific wine actually came in from the vineyard, which is actually quite remarkable. So
Zach, from a tasting profile, you said that maybe yeast is the thing that you remove, the most common thing. What would be, if any, would be the most common thing that you would notice when drinking, smelling, or tasting the wine?
In general, when you taste this Chardonnay, it actually came from a really specific vineyard up in the Jerusalem mountains, and it gave it sort of a, let's say, a really strong fruity aspect and some sort of minerality that is only seen from up there in the Jerusalem hills. The wine itself is silky smooth. We use a little bit of barrel just to enhance a bit of mouthfeel, not to really over impact the wine with lots of oak. It's there, it's in the background, but it's definitely gave it. We did lees steering or batonnage, and it definitely impacted the mouthfeel of the wine. The wine is really fruity and quite tropical in a way. I think 2019 was a great result from this single vineyard up in the Jerusalem hills called Kiryat Anavim, and we're really happy with the results and quite happy with how the natural yeast or wild yeast has been able to produce this wonderful wine.
David, are you tasting this? I know you've had this before, David. What do you think of this wine and how you're tasting it, and how it compares to some of the other whites you're drinking?
So I don't have the Chardonnay in front of me. I tasted it in July, and my memory is not that great. It's either I like a wine or I don't, and I definitely liked it. But for the specific notes, we have to turn back to Zach, and and maybe elaborate on that. I know you mentioned you were talking about wild fermentation overall, but specifically the Chardonnay. It's grown in a warmer climate. Are we getting more of the tropical fruit? Is it more to the stone fruit? What exactly are we getting? And does the process? You also mentioned that it gives a bit more body. Is that also on the Chardonnay, or were you referring more to the red?
No, that's on the Chardonnay. So the Chardonnay, after fermentation or during fermentation, in the middle of fermentation, it moves into barrels to age in barrels. On this specific Chardonnay, we used used barrels, third and second used barrels. So we didn't want to impart a really oaky feeling to the wine. We wanted to let the grapes and the aromatics of the wine to speak for themselves. So the technique that we used with this wine during barrel aging is batonnage, which is lees steering, and it breaks up the cell walls of the dead yeast, and it basically fills in the body of the wine, makes it a bit smoother and silkier, a bit bigger, and adds a bit more volume and length.
And how is that process done?
For the first 2 months, we do it once a week, and for the rest of the period, we do it for about once a month. We just open the bunghole, we put in let's say a stainless steel rod, and we steer the lees from the bottom of the barrel. The lees that are still in the wine while it ferments, after fermentation finishes, the lees, the yeast sink to the bottom and create this sort of mud on the bottom of the barrel. We use this stainless steel rod to steer them up and break the cell walls, and so they incorporate into the wine and impart this lovely mouthfeel. So the red, 2018 was a fantastic year. I absolutely love the reds that we did last year, or it was last vintage in my mind. Again, we used the same idea, same concept. We put 2 buckets out right on beside the tank, fermentation tank, and waited for it to start fermenting. Once we saw fermentation start, we just threw it into the tank, and fermentation started going. Usually, while using wild yeast, they tend to be weaker and to die once alcohol levels start to rise. But in this wine, it actually happened really, really nicely, really well. Maintained color perfectly.
Josh pointed out that, when did this new idea start? The fact is that using cultured yeast is a brand new idea in the scheme of winemaking. It's only been done in the last 100 years. Before that, it was only wild yeast. So it's going back to the original. But second, I have two questions. Number one, if it's such a great idea, it would save money for people not using cultured yeast, and it's better for the wine. Why isn't everybody doing it? That's the first question. Anyway, why isn't it generally done? And the second question is, what about malolactic fermentation?
Why don't more people do it? In general, this technique could be extremely risky. As you said, using commercial yeast has been around for around 100 years, and the strain that everybody uses is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is a very strong yeast. Once you start fermenting with wild yeast, you can end up with yeast that are not from that family, the Saccharomyces family. If they're not from that family, they can be very weak and tend to die when alcohol levels reach about 7%. That's why it can be a really risky thing to do to ferment wild or not use commercial yeast. I think that's one of the main reasons that people don't use it as much, since once you start fermenting, one of the main ideas that every winemaker hears once they get into winemaking school or do the degree or whatever is ferment to dryness. Ferment dry, ferment dry is always what everybody wants to do. And once you start playing with natural yeast or yeast that could die at any moment, once the alcohol levels reach a certain level, you tend to risk things too much. And I think that most wineries and most winemakers just want to go safe, ferment to dry, and get it over with. Regarding the second question, malolactic fermentation will definitely be made on every single red that we produce. It's been made for every single red wine that is around the globe. Just because it is very risky not to do it, because malolactic fermentation can sometimes spontaneously start in the bottle, and it can create massive explosions because CO2 has been generated, and it can just make a big mess.
So do you introduce additional yeast for the malolactic fermentation?
Malolactic fermentation is being done by bacteria, not by yeast. It's not a fermentation per se. It's a chemical process of breaking malic acid into lactic acid.
We have on the call Leah, who's joining us from Barkan Segal. She's helping. You guys may recognize her. She comes to the U.S. whenever they allow her to. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with Segal here in the U.S., maybe from a marketing perspective, how the new brand lost the S?
Right. So thank you for that. So, with the new, to be joking, with all the new gimmicks and trends of the world, you want to be slim. So we want to cut back on as many letters as we can. So why do we need the S? It's just, no, but to be serious, we want Segal to stand as its own, not your, neighborhood buddy's bar, come to Segal's for a glass of beer. It's Segal. It has depth. It has strategy. It has craftsmanship.
So I'll throw it back over to Zach now to maybe talk about the next wine. The next wine I think we're going to be tasting is from the Dishon series. I also want to talk a little bit about your wines and their ageability and, if this does anything. And while we were looking for something, I found in my cellar with Segal with an S. So I still can call this one Segal's, I hope, if it's old vintage. I found a 2006 Argamon. Can you just tell me a little bit about how your wines are aging, maybe in the series and stuff like that too?
If I'm talking about the Argamon, I would just like to say that Argamon, if you're not familiar with the variety, it is an Israeli variety composed. It was invented in Israel back in '73. It is a cross between Kalyan and Kuzau. It's an Israeli invention. It was invented in order to give an answer to big volumes of wines from the Kalyan. Kalyan usually produces really big bunches, and the Kuzau has a really strong, intense color, strong purple color, and so they mix those two together in order to create a high yield, really strong color with really high acidity in order to give an answer to to big volume winemaking. What we did in Segal with the Argaman is just reduce the yield to around, let's say, 4 tons per hectare, which is really reducing and making every grape filled with aromatic intensity and really strong color. And then in terms of winemaking technique with the entire series, and specifically with the Dijon Cabernet Sauvignon, we usually impart a really long skin maceration process on the wine during fermentation. We pump over, we stir the wine with the skins, and we try to extract as much color and tannins as we can. And after that, it's been moved into barrels for around 18 months. And so the tannins are being kind of matured and they're being integrated a lot better. And so the result is a big volume wine, but still not too offensive and quite round and with a really long finish and really strong intensity of fruit.
What does that style do to, like we heard a little bit what makes it wild, what makes the single vineyard Dijon, what gives it their identity?
I want to say that the fact that we use single vineyards and use one variety from a single vineyard makes this a more approach to showing what can be made from just taking one vineyard, not incorporating any blends, not incorporating anything to make the color a bit better or make the mouthfeel a bit better or add a bit of this aroma or add a bit of that aroma. We just let the vineyard talk for itself. With this wine, we started a long time ago. It has been around since 2003, if I remember correctly. So this series has been going on for ages. The main idea is to give focus to the vineyard and a variety from this single vineyard, while using as many components as we can from the skins to give the wine longevity. I think these wines can age for 15 years and maybe even 20. The Argaman is an Israeli variety. It is an Israeli cross between Carignan and Sauzal. Carignan from south of France and Sauzal from Portugal. These are two different varieties. They mixed them together, and the result was called Argaman, which in Hebrew means crimson. The next wine that I would like to talk about is something that I think all of you probably know. It is the Petit Unfiltered, or the little brother of the Segal Unfiltered. I would start with the main idea that is coming behind this wine or winemaking technique. The wine is, again, it is not a single vineyard, to be honest. It has actually a mixture. The Petit UF is a single vineyard. The UF in general as a concept is not a single vineyard. The Petit UF is going on the same idea and technique of unfiltered wines. The idea came from the notion that filtering a wine just before bottling can, at some occasions, remove some of the aromatic compounds and some of the feeling that the wines bring, and could maybe prevent us from feeling what the vineyard actually has to say or what the wine has to say. And that's what made us make the UF, or the unfiltered, in the first place. Over the years, back in 2014, I think it was, or 2015, I think it was the first Petit Unfiltered that we made, which is basically Segal Unfiltered's little brother. This wine is a single vineyard. It came from a vineyard that we call Plateau, which is in the Upper Galilee near Dijon, which is around 810 meters above sea level. It's quite high, quite cold, really low yields, and it is one of the better places to grow Cabernet Sauvignon in Israel today. Again, this wine is made with traditional winemaking techniques, fermentation on skins, punch downs, pump overs, and then quite an extensive barrel aging process. New barrels are around 40%, if I remember correctly, with this wine, and or maybe around 50%. It changes from year to year when we try to find out different aspects to bring into this wine. And again, main idea is to remove the filtration process from the wine, to keep it real and to let the wine speak for itself in the bottle. And I think the result is really, really amazing. This wine is rich and full, and the really good length and good integration of oak and fruit. I think the result is really, really nice for this price range. The winemaking process can be a long, and this wine is being released after spending about 2.5 years in the winery. And after all this time, labeling this wine has to be done manually, since the label is made out of crushed bark from a mulberry tree that is growing right outside the vineyard. It's actually been made in this really small village up in the Upper Galilee by this really nice guy that lives right next to the vineyard, and he presses the bark and he bleaches it, makes it white, and then prints our logo on the label itself, and then ships it to us, and everything's labeled manually.
It's interesting to listen to the winemaker and to see Leah and everybody here. And what really impresses me, if I wouldn't know that Segal is part of Barkan, the largest winery in Israel, you would think that you're talking to this amazing boutique, innovative, great, wow winery that's doing something wild. And really, and that's what's not easily done for a big winery. So to see Barkan, who's really the biggest and one of the best wineries we work with, the largest partner we have out of Israel, but to see the detail in every wine and the label and the wild fermentation and the paper on the unfiltered and amazing. Really, it shows you the details of attention to quality and how many winemakers they have and how they pay attention. I call it sort of a winery within a winery. Really, even though I know most of what I heard today, it's still very impressive to see how a big winery can be so micromanaged with its Segal program. Really impressive.
Everybody, drum roll. We have a big reveal.
J style.
J style.
Courtesy to the one and only, the greatest, J. Buxbaum out of Elizabeth, New Jersey, my friends.
So the big reveal for this evening is a new series that has been around here in Israel for the past year and a half, and it's gonna be exported to the U.S. Leah, you'll say when it's gonna come. I don't wanna open.
Coming soon. Stay tuned.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. It is the whole cluster series from Segal. I don't know. All right. So if you can see this now, I don't know what to focus.
It's too bright.
Too light.
So in a nutshell, we can tell you that sorry for budgeting, the idea of a whole cluster is like this combination of minimalism and that maximizes the grapes itself. So the label is not, too kitschy. It's very clean white with like a little imprint of a cluster, of the whole cluster. and it has a wax top. But the really exciting thing is not how the bottle looks like; it's what's in it. So, Zach, the floor is all yours.
The main idea with whole cluster fermentation is fermenting the wines with whole bunches. Usually, when red winemaking starts, we crush and separate the grapes from the stems. This process has been eliminated completely, and the grapes have been just put into a tank as they are. Fermentation starts with some of the juice that's been trickling down in the tank at the bottom, and half of the fermentation has been going enzymatically inside of the grapes. And it creates this amazing aromatic profile, kind of like bubble gum, and this is just absolutely fantastic. What's more is that we keep the stems with the wines during fermentation, which is not done in any other wine. And keeping the stems, if you're not careful, can impart really bitter tannins. But once you harvest it at exactly the right time, and you keep it with the clusters for exactly the right amount of time, it creates this amazing aromatic profile and this really amazing mouthfeel. I think the results is the most exciting wines that we've ever made in Segal. We have a Syrah and a Pinot Noir. The Pinot Noir is going to come to the US very soon. It is absolutely delicious. It's been my favorite since it's been out. I would, Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but vintage 17 is going to go to the US. And,
yes, 17 and some of the newer ones. It's supposed to go into the bottling this July.
You talked about it earlier, and the rating. So that's from Wine Enthusiast, a very, very respectable source, and they rate wines all the time. Obviously, giving the Fusion a 90 points, that makes it a great value for your money. If you're looking for a wine under $15, it's probably your go-to. It's also one of our most popular sellers, so definitely a good choice, and love the new packaging. Yeah, I was gonna ask Leah, like you mentioned, there's a huge initiative now to get all those Israeli wines, widely available in the U.S. Leah, you want to talk about that for a moment?
Right, thank you. So we do have a big initiative, Wines of Israel, incorporating 27 Israeli wineries that usually don't really play so nice together. Most of them are with the Herzog Royal Wine Corp, with Carmel Tepperberg ourselves, also Ramat Golan. And the idea is to remind everybody that Israel, besides being accommodating to the kosher audience, it's a terroir. It's from the Levant area. It should have its recognition and respect on the shelves. Just like in Israel, we have, like Nathan said, we have in North America, aisles of wines where you can find Baron Herzog alongside other wineries. We want American wine stores in the non-Jewish areas to have little signs saying, wine from Israel, not using the K word. And hopefully it's another way for people to get involved with Israel and the wonderful things it produces. So definitely stay tuned, everybody in their cities post-COVID. We're going to have great events coming soon, hopefully coming back to Texas, New York, and California. These are the 3 states that were chosen for this year's ventures.
Can you talk maybe a little bit also, working, you have a great team over there. We're seeing you and Leah both here helping, but I know it's not just the 2 of you guys. You also have my friend Ido, who's probably studying with his face in the book right now, or writing a report. He's studying to become a master of wine. For those of you who don't know, there's less than 300 of them in the world and maybe 2 in Israel. Can you talk a little bit about maybe working with him and learning yourself on all the experimenting that you're doing these days?
Yeah, I have been working with Ido for the past 3.5 years, ever since he came into the winery. We have been working on this new Segal look ever since he came along, and he brought in whole cluster fermentation, the concept of marketing wild fermentation as a brand. We're also doing some local varieties, and basically my experience from my point of view, it has been really interesting seeing how whole cluster fermentation can really just define a wine and make the same. I know these varieties, I know these vineyards from before we made them into a whole fermentation wine, and they looked just completely different. And winemaking process has made them look in a different view in my mind, in my eyes, and it has been enlightening. And I'm grateful for the opportunity in general.